The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the Lewiston post office, and Rebecca Zeller's hands trembled so violently she could barely gather her skirts to descend, her eyes darting across the dusty Montana street like a hunted animal searching for the predator she knew would eventually find her. It was June of 1876, and Lewiston was nothing more than a collection of weathered buildings clinging to existence in the Montana Territory, surrounded by endless prairie and the distant promise of mountains. Rebecca had traveled for 3 weeks to reach this remote corner of the world, her face hidden beneath a bonnet she'd pulled as low as it would go, her belongings reduced to a single carpet bag that held everything she could carry when she'd fled in the middle of the night. The driver extended his hand to help her down, but Rebecca flinched before accepting it, the gesture so ingrained she couldn't stop herself. The man's eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing as she stepped onto the wooden sidewalk, her legs unsteady after so many hours of travel. "This is as far as we go, miss," the driver said, tipping his hat. "Stage heads back east tomorrow morning if you're needing to return." "I will not be returning," Rebecca said quietly, her voice barely audible over the sound of horses and wagon wheels on the street. She would die before she went back. The driver nodded and climbed back to his seat, leaving Rebecca standing alone with her bag, 23 years old and more afraid than she'd ever been in her life. The bruises on her arms had faded to yellow during the journey, but the memories were still fresh, still raw. Her husband of 2 years, Gerald, had been a respected banker in Chicago. To the outside world, they'd been the perfect couple. Behind closed doors, he'd been a monster. Rebecca had endured it for as long as she could, believing his promises that he would change, that she'd done something to provoke him, that it was somehow her fault. But when he'd broken her wrist and threatened to do worse if she ever thought of leaving, something inside her had finally broken free of his control. She'd waited until he'd left for a business trip, pawned her wedding ring, and bought a ticket as far west as the money would take her. The afternoon sun beat down on Lewiston's Main Street, and Rebecca forced herself to move, to put one foot in front of the other despite the fear that made her want to curl into a ball and hide. She needed work. She needed shelter. She needed to disappear into this tiny town where Gerald would never think to look for her. The first building she passed was a saloon, its doors swinging open to reveal rough-looking men drinking despite the early hour. Rebecca hurried past, her heart pounding. Next came a general store, a blacksmith, and a small building with a sign that read Doctor's Office. At the end of the street, she spotted a modest hotel. The hotel keeper was a stout woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Mrs. Patterson. She looked Rebecca up and down with sharp eyes that seemed to see too much. "How long you planning to stay?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "I need a room for tonight," Rebecca said. "And I wondered if you might know of anyone in town who's hiring. I can cook, clean, so I'm a hard worker." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. "You running from something, honey?" Rebecca's blood went cold. "I just need work." "That's not what I asked," Mrs. Patterson said, but her tone was gentle. "But it's not my business either. Room's $1 a night, $3.50 for the week. As for work, there's a ranch about 2 miles outside town. The Ashford place. Owner's a bachelor, lost his housekeeper last month when she moved back east to be with her daughter. He's been managing on his own, but I hear the place is falling apart. He might be willing to hire on someone." "Thank you," Rebecca said, paying for one night with precious coins from her dwindling supply. "Could you tell me how to get there?" "Head west on the main road. You'll see the sign. But wait until morning. It's not safe for a woman to be walking alone out there at dusk." Rebecca took the key to her room and climbed the narrow stairs, every muscle in her body aching from travel and tension. The room was small but clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the street. She locked the door, checked it twice, then wedged a chair under the handle before finally allowing herself to sit on the edge of the bed. Her hands were still shaking. Even here, 1,000 miles from Chicago, she could feel Gerald's presence like a shadow. She could hear his voice telling her she was worthless, that she belonged to him, that she could never escape. Rebecca pressed her palms against her eyes and took a deep breath. She had escaped. She was free. She just had to keep reminding herself of that. That night, she barely slept, starting awake at every sound, her heart racing with panic. When dawn finally broke, Rebecca washed her face with water from the basin, changed into her only other dress, and headed downstairs. Mrs. Patterson was already up, serving breakfast to a few early guests. "The Ashford Ranch," Rebecca said. "You are certain the owner might hire me? Ryan Ashford's a good man," Mrs. Patterson said. "Fair, honest, keeps to himself mostly. His father built that ranch from nothing, and Ryan's been running it since his father passed 5 years back. You'll be safe there, if that's what you're worried about." The word safe made Rebecca's throat tighten. She wasn't sure she'd ever feel safe again. The walk to the ranch took nearly an hour in the morning heat. Rebecca's dress clung to her back with sweat, and her feet ached in her worn boots. But when the ranch finally came into view, she stopped to catch her breath and take it in. It was larger than she'd expected, with a sprawling main house, a barn, several outbuildings, and corrals where horses grazed peacefully. The property was beautiful in a rugged, untamed way, surrounded by rolling grassland that stretched to the horizon. Rebecca approached the main house, noting the sagging porch and the windows that needed cleaning. She knocked on the door and waited, her stomach churning with nervousness. When no one answered, she knocked again, louder this time. "Around back," a voice called. Rebecca followed a worn path around the side of the house to find a man working in what appeared to be a vegetable garden that had seen better days. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing worn denim and a hat that shaded his face. As she approached, he straightened and turned toward her, and Rebecca got her first clear look at Ryan Ashford. He was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that needed cutting. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, brown and warm, with laugh lines at the corners despite the serious set of his mouth. There was nothing threatening in his posture, nothing that set off the warning bells that had become her constant companion. Still, Rebecca kept her distance. "Can I help you, madam?" Ryan asked, pulling off his work gloves. "My name is Rebecca Zeller," she said, pleased that her voice came out steady despite her nerves. "Mrs. Patterson at the hotel told me you might be in need of a housekeeper." Ryan's eyebrows rose slightly. "Word travels fast in this town." "I am a hard worker," Rebecca continued quickly. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend a garden. I am reliable and I am desperate for work." Something in her tone must have reached him because Ryan's expression softened. "When can you start?" Rebecca blinked, surprised. "You do not want references, or to know where I came from. I figure that's your business," Ryan said simply. "I need someone who can keep a house from falling down around my ears, and you look like you need work. Seems straightforward to me. I can offer room and board plus $20 a month. There's a small cabin out back that the previous housekeeper used. It's yours if you want it." $20 a month was more than Rebecca had dared hope for. "I want it," she said. Thank you so much," Ryan nodded. "Let me show you around." He led her through the main house, pointing out the kitchen, the parlor, the dining room, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. Everything was covered in a layer of dust, with dishes piled in the sink and clothes draped over furniture. It was clear that Ryan had been struggling to manage on his own. "I know it's a mess," Ryan admitted, looking almost embarrassed. "I have been focusing on keeping the ranch running. The house has suffered." "I can handle this," Rebecca said with more confidence than she felt. "When would you like me to begin?" "Today, if you are willing. I will show you the cabin first." The cabin was a single room with a bed, a small stove, a table, and a rocking chair. It was simple but clean, with a window that looked out toward the mountains. To Rebecca, it felt like a palace. Her own space, her own lock on the door. "It is perfect," she said softly. "I will give you the rest of the day to settle in," Ryan said. "We eat breakfast at sunrise, dinner at noon, and supper at sunset. If that schedule does not work for you, let me know." "It works fine," Rebecca assured him. "Thank you again, Mr. Ashford. You will not regret hiring me." Ryan looked at her for a long moment, and Rebecca had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her careful composure to the terrified woman beneath. But all he said was, "Call me Ryan. Mr. Ashford was my father." After Ryan left, Rebecca sat on the edge of her new bed and finally allowed herself to breathe. She had a job. She had a home, however temporary. She was 2,000 miles from Gerald, and for the first time in years, she was answerable to no one but herself. That first week passed in a blur of hard work. Rebecca threw herself into cleaning the main house with a fervor that bordered on obsessive. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, beat the dust from curtains and rugs, and tackled the mountain of dishes and laundry. The physical labor was exhausting, but it kept her mind occupied, kept the fear at bay. Ryan was gone most days, working with the cattle and horses, mending fences and managing the ranch hands who came and went. When he was around the house, he was unfailingly polite but kept his distance, seeming to sense that Rebecca needed space. He never raised his voice, never made sudden movements that might startle her, and always thanked her for the meals she prepared. It took Rebecca nearly 2 weeks to stop flinching every time she heard his footsteps. One evening, as she was serving supper, Ryan said, "You have done an incredible job with the house. I had forgotten it could look this good." Rebecca felt a flush of pride. "Thank you. I am glad to be useful." "You are more than useful," Ryan said. "You are a miracle worker. The men have been commenting on how good the food is too. I think they were getting tired of my cooking." Rebecca allowed herself a small smile as she took her seat at the opposite end of the table. Ryan had insisted from the beginning that she eat her meals in the main house rather than alone in the cabin, though she always maintained careful distance. "How many men work here?" Rebecca asked. She had seen several ranch hands coming and going but hadn't interacted with them much. 5 full-time hands, plus a few extra during cattle drives and branding season. They have their own bunkhouse and mostly handle their own meals, but I have been thinking we could extend your cooking to include them if you are willing. I would pay extra, of course." "I can do that," Rebecca said immediately. The more money she could save, the better. "You do not have to decide right now," Ryan said. "You have already taken on a lot." "I want to," Rebecca insisted. "I need to stay busy." Ryan studied her across the table. "Can I ask you something, Rebecca?" She tensed immediately. "What?" "You do not have to answer if you do not want to," he said carefully. "But why are you so afraid?" Rebecca's hands clenched in her lap. "I am not afraid." "Yes, you are. You have been afraid since the moment you arrived. You watch the road constantly like you are expecting someone. You flinch at sudden sounds, and you look at me sometimes like you think I might hurt you." "You would not understand," Rebecca whispered. "Maybe not," Ryan agreed. "But I want you to know that you are safe here. Whatever you are running from, whoever you are running from, they would have to go through me to get to you. And I do not let anyone hurt people under my protection." Rebecca's eyes burned with unexpected tears. "Why would you do that for me? You barely know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Ryan said simply. And because I know what it looks like when someone has been hurt, I see it in your eyes every day." Rebecca looked down at her plate, unable to meet his gaze. "I was married," she said finally, the words coming out barely louder than a breath. "He hurt me, often. I ran away while he was traveling. If he finds me, he will kill me." The silence that followed was deafening. When Rebecca finally gathered the courage to look up, she saw fury blazing in Ryan's eyes, but not directed at her. Never at her. "What was his name?" Ryan asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Why? Because if he comes here, I want to know who I am dealing with. Gerald Krause. He is a banker in Chicago, respected, well-connected. No one would believe me if I told them what he really is." "I believe you," Ryan said, "and I meant what I said. You are safe here." Something in Rebecca's chest loosened. A tight knot of tension she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to be without it. She did not fully trust Ryan, not yet, but she wanted to. God, how she wanted to. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, Rebecca began to relax. She expanded her duties to include cooking for the ranch hands, who treated her with rough courtesy and genuine appreciation for her food. She spent her free time working in the garden, coaxing vegetables from the Montana soil and finding peace in the simple act of nurturing growing things. Ryan continued to be patient and kind, never pushing her to talk about her past, but always available if she needed someone to listen. He taught her to ride one of the gentler horses, a mare named Clover, so she could make the trip to town on her own if she needed to. He fixed the loose step on her cabin without being asked and brought her books from his own collection when he noticed her reading by lamplight in the evenings. It was in the small gestures that Rebecca began to see who Ryan truly was. He was a man who worked himself to exhaustion every day, but always had time to help one of his hands with a problem. He was firm but fair, never losing his temper even when things went wrong. He had a dry sense of humor that surprised her into laughter more than once. And he was lonely, though he tried to hide it. Rebecca found herself thinking about him more than she should. She noticed the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he worked, the way his hands were always gentle with the horses, the way he smiled at her across the dinner table when she told him about her day. She noticed, and it terrified her. She had sworn never to trust another man, never to let anyone have that kind of power over her again. But Ryan was nothing like Gerald. Where Gerald had been charming in public and cruel in private, Ryan was the same steady, honest man all the time. Where Gerald had used his words as weapons, Ryan spoke with care and consideration. Where Gerald had taken, Ryan gave. It was late September when things shifted between them. Rebecca was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard raised voices outside. She looked out the window to see Ryan arguing with a stranger, a large man with a mean face who was clearly drunk. "I told you before, Garrett," Ryan was saying, his voice calm but firm. "You are not welcome here. You need to leave." "You think you are so much better than everyone else," the man slurred. "High and mighty Ryan Ashford with his perfect ranch. I think you are drunk and looking for a fight. I do not want to hurt you, but I will defend my property if I have to." Garrett took a swing at Ryan, who dodged it easily and then, with a speed that surprised Rebecca, had the man's arm twisted behind his back. "You are going to sleep this off in town," Ryan said. "I will drive you there myself." Rebecca watched as Ryan loaded the man into a wagon and drove off, her heart pounding. When he returned an hour later, she had supper waiting. "I am sorry you had to see that," Ryan said as he washed his hands at the pump outside. "Who was he?" "A former ranch hand I had to let go for drinking on the job. He comes around sometimes when he is drunk, trying to cause trouble." Ryan dried his hands and met her eyes. "Did it frighten you?" A little, Rebecca admitted. But not because of you. You handled it without real violence. Gerald would have beaten him senseless. It was the first time she had spoken her husband's name since that initial confession, and Ryan noticed. He sat down at the table, but instead of starting his meal, he said, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I was engaged once. Her name was Sarah. This was about 7 years ago. She was beautiful and charming, and I thought I was the luckiest man alive. We were supposed to get married in the spring." Ryan paused, his jaw tightening. 3 weeks before the wedding, I found out she had been lying to me about everything. She did not love me. She loved my land, my money, what the ranch could give her. When I confronted her, she did not even deny it. She just laughed and said I was a fool for believing she could ever love a simple rancher. "I am sorry," Rebecca said softly. "That must have hurt terribly." It did. For a long time I told myself I was better off alone, that it was safer not to trust anyone. But that is not really living, is it? That is just existing. Rebecca understood what he was telling her, the vulnerability he was showing. "No," she agreed. "It is not really living." "You make me want to try again," Ryan said, his eyes intense on hers. "Not with just anyone. With you, Rebecca. I know it is too soon. I know you are still healing from what he did to you. But I needed you to know that when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I would like to court you properly. I would like a chance to show you that not all men are like him." Rebecca's heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from the possibility of being hurt again. But a larger part, a part that was growing stronger every day, wanted to take the risk. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I am so afraid of trusting again." "I know," Ryan said. "And I will wait as long as it takes. There is no pressure, no expectations. Just know that I am here and I care about you." That night, Rebecca lay awake in her cabin, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Ryan's words. She thought about the man he had shown himself to be over the past 4 months. She thought about how safe she felt on his ranch, how he had never given her a single reason not to trust him. And she thought about the way her heart lifted every time she saw him, the way she found herself looking forward to their dinners together, the way his smile could chase away the shadows that still haunted her. She was falling in love with him, and it was the most terrifying and wonderful feeling in the world. The next morning, Rebecca made Ryan's favorite breakfast and tried not to think too hard about what she was about to do. When they sat down to eat, she said, "I have been thinking about what you said last night." Ryan set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "And I am still afraid. I do not know if I will ever stop being afraid completely, but I would like to try with you, if the offer is still open." The smile that spread across Ryan's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. "The offer is open, for as long as you need it to be." They started slowly, taking small steps toward something more than employer and employee. Ryan began sitting closer to her at meals, and Rebecca allowed it. He took her riding through the ranch property, showing her his favorite spots, and she found herself relaxing into his presence. He told her stories about growing up in Montana, about his parents and his dreams for the future, and she shared carefully edited versions of her own childhood, the happy memories before her marriage. It was in those quiet moments, riding through the golden autumn grass or sitting on the porch watching the sunset, that Rebecca felt herself healing. Ryan never pushed for more than she was ready to give. When he finally reached for her hand one evening, it was with such tentative gentleness that Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. She laced her fingers through his and held on tight. Winter came to Montana with a vengeance, bringing snow and bitter cold. The ranch work slowed, and Ryan spent more time in the house, often reading by the fire in the evenings while Rebecca sewed or worked on her own book. They had fallen into a comfortable routine that felt like a marriage in all but name. On Christmas Eve, Ryan surprised her with a gift, a beautiful shawl he had bought during a rare trip to the larger town of Helena. "I saw it and thought of you," he said, looking almost shy. Rebecca had made him a new shirt, stitching it by lamplight over the course of several weeks. When he tried it on, she felt a surge of satisfaction at how well it fit. "This is the nicest gift anyone has ever given me," Ryan said, running his hand over the fabric. "It is just a shirt." "No," he said softly. "It is hours of your time, your skill, your care. It means everything to me." They stood by the fire, snow falling softly outside the windows, and Rebecca felt something shift inside her. She stepped closer to Ryan, her heart pounding, and placed her hand on his chest. She could feel his heart racing beneath her palm, could see the question in his eyes. "You can kiss me," she whispered. "If you want to. Are you sure?" "I am sure." Ryan cupped her face in his hands with infinite care, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When she did not pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in the gentlest kiss Rebecca had ever experienced. It was nothing like the demanding, possessive kisses Gerald had forced on her. This was soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Rebecca was trembling, but not from fear, from hope. "I love you," Ryan said, the words simple and true. "I have loved you for months now. You do not have to say it back. I just needed you to know." "I love you too," Rebecca said, and realized it was true. She loved his kindness, his patience, his strength. She loved the life they were building together, the peace she felt in his presence. She loved him, wholly and completely, in a way she had never loved anyone before. The winter passed in a blur of quiet happiness. They grew closer every day, learning each other's habits and preferences, building a partnership based on respect and genuine affection. Ryan proposed on a clear February morning when the snow sparkled like diamonds under the sun. "I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards," he said, kneeling in the snow outside her cabin. "But I know my heart, and I know it belongs to you. Will you marry me, Rebecca? Will you build a life here with me?" "Yes," Rebecca said, pulling him to his feet and into her arms. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in March of 1877 in a simple ceremony at the small church in Lewiston. Mrs. Patterson from the hotel served as Rebecca's witness, and one of Ryan's most trusted ranch hands stood up for him. It was nothing like Rebecca's first wedding, which had been a grand affair with hundreds of guests in Chicago. This was small and intimate and perfect. Their wedding night was tender and patient, with Ryan taking every care to make sure Rebecca felt safe and cherished. He proved to her with his touch that love did not have to hurt, that intimacy could be beautiful and mutual and full of joy. Rebecca cried afterward, but they were tears of relief and happiness, and Ryan held her until she fell asleep in his arms. The months that followed were the happiest of Rebecca's life. She threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, adding curtains and rugs and small touches that transformed it from a bachelor's dwelling to a place of warmth and comfort. She worked alongside Ryan when he needed help, learning the rhythms of ranch life and discovering a strength she had not known she possessed. In May, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had never wanted children with Gerald, had been relieved when none came. But this was different. This was Ryan's child, conceived in love, and she found herself desperately wanting this baby. Ryan was overjoyed when she told him, picking her up and spinning her around before setting her down carefully, as if she were made of glass. "I am not that fragile," Rebecca laughed. "I know," Ryan said, placing his hand over her still flat belly. "But you are carrying the most precious thing in the world to me. I am going to take care of both of you." And he did. As Rebecca's pregnancy progressed, Ryan was attentive without being smothering. He took on extra work around the house, insisted she rest more, and rubbed her aching feet every evening without complaint. He talked to her belly, telling their growing baby stories about the ranch and making promises about the future. It was in June, almost exactly 1 year after Rebecca had arrived in Lewiston, that her past caught up with her. She was in the garden, picking vegetables for supper when she heard horses approaching. Rebecca straightened, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, and felt her blood turn to ice. Gerald was riding up the path to the house, flanked by 2 men who looked like hired guns. Rebecca could not move, could not breathe. Gerald was older than Ryan, in his late 30s, with graying hair and the kind of polished appearance that came from wealth and privilege. He looked exactly as she remembered, and the sight of him brought back every moment of terror she had tried so hard to forget. "Rebecca," Gerald called out, dismounting. "There you are. You have led me on quite the chase." Rebecca finally found her voice. "How did you find me?" "Did you really think you could hide from me?" Gerald laughed. "I am a wealthy man with connections everywhere. It took time, but I tracked you down eventually. Now gather your things. We are going home." "No," Rebecca said, her hand instinctively going to her belly. "I am not going anywhere with you. We are divorced." She had filed the papers months ago, though she had no idea if they had been finalized. "Those papers mean nothing," Gerald said, his pleasant expression slipping into the cruelty she knew so well. "You are my wife, my property, and you are coming home. Now stop being difficult." He started toward her, and Rebecca backed away, her heart pounding. "Stay away from me, or what? You will scream. There is no one here to help you, Rebecca. You are alone, just like you were always alone when you needed help." But she was not alone. Ryan came around the corner of the house at a run, his face thunderous. He put himself between Rebecca and Gerald without hesitation. "You must be the banker," Ryan said, his voice deadly calm. "You are not welcome here. Leave. Now." Gerald looked Ryan up and down dismissively. "And who are you?" The hired hand she has been spreading her legs for. Ryan's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained steady. "I am her husband, Ryan Ashford. And I am telling you to get off my land before I make you leave." "Her husband," Gerald laughed. "She is already married, to me, which makes whatever you think you have with her meaningless. She is coming home where she belongs." "I belong here," Rebecca said, finding strength in Ryan's presence. "I love him. I am carrying his child. And I am never going back to you, Gerald. You cannot make me." Gerald's face darkened with rage. "You dare to speak to me that way, after everything I gave you? You ungrateful, worthless." He lunged forward, but Ryan was faster. He caught Gerald's wrist and twisted, sending the older man stumbling back. "Touch her and you die," Ryan said, and there was no doubt he meant it. "I do not care who you are or where you came from. You have no power here." The 2 men Gerald had brought with him stepped forward, hands moving to their guns. But before they could draw, 4 of Ryan's ranch hands appeared from various directions, their own weapons ready. The odds had shifted dramatically. "Here is how this is going to work," Ryan said to Gerald. "You are going to get back on your horse and ride away. You are going to forget Rebecca exists, because if you ever come near her again, if you ever threaten her or try to take her from this ranch, I will make sure everyone in Chicago knows exactly what kind of man you really are. And then I will make sure you cannot hurt anyone ever again. Do we understand each other?" Gerald's face was mottled with rage, but he was smart enough to recognize that he was outmatched. "This is not over," he hissed. "I will have lawyers. Your marriage to Rebecca was never legal in Montana territory," Ryan interrupted. "I checked. She filed for divorce in accordance with Montana law, and it was granted 3 months ago. You have no claim on her. The only thing you will get from lawyers is a bill for their time." Rebecca felt weak with relief. She had not known the divorce had been finalized, had been afraid to hope it was real. Gerald stared at Rebecca with such hatred that she took a step back. "You will regret this," he said. "No one leaves me. No one makes a fool of me." "The only fool here is you," Ryan said, "for not seeing what a remarkable woman she is, for thinking you could own another human being. Now get out before I lose my patience." Gerald and his men left, but not before Gerald shot Rebecca one last look that promised vengeance. Rebecca stood frozen until the sound of hoofbeats faded, and then her knees gave out. Ryan caught her before she hit the ground, holding her tight. "It is over," he murmured into her hair. "He is gone. You are safe." "He will come back," Rebecca sobbed. "He will find a way, then I will handle it. We will handle it together. I meant what I said, Rebecca. I will protect you with everything I have. You are my wife, the mother of my child, the love of my life. And I will never let him hurt you again." That night, Ryan sent one of his men to town to fetch the sheriff and file a formal complaint against Gerald for trespassing and threatening behavior. He also sent telegrams to contacts in Chicago, people who could spread word that Rebecca was under the protection of the Ashford ranch, and any attempt to harm her would be met with swift and severe consequences. Over the following weeks, Ryan worked to ensure Rebecca felt safe again. He hired an additional man specifically to watch the roads and report any suspicious strangers. He taught Rebecca to shoot, insisting that she should be able to defend herself if needed. And most importantly, he was there, steady and constant, reminding her every day that she was loved and protected. Gerald never returned. Whether it was Ryan's threats, the divorce papers, or simply the recognition that he could not touch Rebecca here, he stayed away. Slowly, as the summer passed, Rebecca began to believe that she was truly free. Her pregnancy progressed smoothly, and by late January of 1878, she was huge and uncomfortable, and more than ready to meet their baby. The birth was long and difficult, attended by a midwife from town, and with Ryan refusing to leave her side despite the woman's insistence that it was not proper for husbands to be present. "This is my wife and my child," Ryan said firmly. "I am staying." When their son finally arrived in the early hours of the morning, red-faced and screaming his displeasure at the world, Rebecca held him and wept with joy. Ryan bent over them both, his own eyes wet with tears. "He is perfect," Ryan whispered. "You are both perfect." They named him Thomas Ryan Ashford, and from the moment Rebecca held him, she knew that every moment of fear and pain she had endured to get to this point had been worth it. She had a family now, a real family built on love and trust, and nothing could take that away from her. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy who loved following his father around the ranch. Rebecca gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter they named Sarah in memory of Ryan's lost love, who proved to have forgiven him in a letter before she died, and another son named William. The ranch prospered under Ryan's careful management, and their home was always full of laughter and warmth. Rebecca never forgot what Gerald had done to her, but the memories lost their power to hurt as time passed. She had learned that love did not have to mean pain, that marriage could be a partnership of equals, that happiness was not just possible but attainable. She had learned, most of all, that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. On their 10th anniversary, Ryan took Rebecca riding to a hilltop that overlooked the ranch. They sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, while their children played with the ranch hands below. "Do you ever regret it?" Ryan asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Coming here, taking a chance on me." Rebecca leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sage. Never, not once. You saved me, Ryan, not just from Gerald, but from myself. You showed me that I could trust again, love again, be happy again. You saved me too, Ryan said softly. I was so lonely before you came. I did not even realize how much I needed someone until you knocked on my door that day, fear written all across your face. I was terrified, Rebecca remembered, of everything, but you were so kind. Your kindness truly did rewrite my whole story. We rewrote it together, Ryan corrected, kissing her temple. Everything we have built, we built together, and I intend to keep building with you for the rest of our lives. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Below them, Thomas was teaching Sarah how to rope fence posts while William, at only 2 years old, toddled after them trying to keep up. It was an ordinary evening on the ranch, and it was everything Rebecca had ever dreamed of. When they finally rode back down to the house, Rebecca felt a contentment so deep it made her chest ache. She had traveled so far, both in distance and spirit, to reach this place. She had been broken and terrified, convinced she would never feel safe again. But Ryan had proven her wrong with his patience and his unwavering love. That night, after the children were in bed, Ryan held Rebecca close in their room and whispered, "I love you more every day." "How is that possible?" "Because that is what real love does," Rebecca said, kissing him softly. "It grows, it deepens, it gets better with time. Then I look forward to 50 more years of it getting better." 50 more years, Rebecca agreed. At least, the ranch continued to thrive as their children grew. Thomas developed his father's way with horses and took over much of the breaking and training. Sarah, fierce and independent, proved to have a head for business and began managing the ranch's accounts when she was barely 16. William, the youngest, had his mother's gentle heart and became a teacher, opening a small school in Lewiston for the children of ranchers and townspeople. Rebecca expanded her own role on the ranch over the years, not content to simply manage the house. She started breeding chickens and developed a strain that was particularly hardy in Montana winters. She kept meticulous records of the ranch's operations and worked alongside Ryan to make decisions about expansion and investment. They were true partners in every sense of the word. In 1889, Montana became a state, and the Ashfords celebrated with the entire town of Lewiston at a grand party that lasted 2 days. By then, Rebecca and Ryan were known throughout the region as one of the most successful ranching couples in Montana. But more than that, they were known for their kindness, their fairness, and their willingness to help neighbors in need. Rebecca never forgot where she had come from or what she had survived. She made it her mission to help other women in difficult situations, quietly providing jobs and shelter to those who arrived in Lewiston running from their own demons. She never asked for their stories unless they wanted to share, but she made sure they knew they were safe. "You are doing what I did for you," Ryan observed one evening after Rebecca had hired yet another frightened young woman. "I am paying it forward," Rebecca said. "Someone showed me kindness when I desperately needed it. The least I can do is offer the same to others." Ryan pulled her into his arms. "Have I told you lately that you are the most remarkable woman I have ever known?" "You might have mentioned it once or twice," Rebecca teased, "but I do not mind hearing it again." As they grew older, their love only deepened. The passion of their early years mellowed into something even more profound, a bone-deep knowledge of each other that needed no words. They could communicate with a glance across a crowded room, could sense when the other needed comfort or space, could finish each other's sentences without thinking. Their children married and had children of their own, filling the ranch with a new generation. Rebecca delighted in being a grandmother, passing on her skills and her stories to eager young listeners. She told them about coming to Montana with nothing but fear and a determination to survive, about meeting their grandfather and slowly learning to trust again, about building a life from scratch in the wilderness. "You were so brave, Grandma," one of her granddaughters said. "I was terrified," Rebecca corrected gently. "But I learned that bravery is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear. And I learned that accepting help is not weakness, it is wisdom." Ryan, overhearing this conversation, added, "Your grandmother is the strongest person I have ever known. She survived things that would have broken most people, and she came out the other side with her kindness intact. That is true strength." In the spring of 1903, 27 years after Rebecca had first arrived in Lewiston, she and Ryan celebrated their silver anniversary. Their children organized a party that brought together friends and neighbors from across the territory. The ranch house was bursting with people, food, music, and laughter. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Rebecca found herself standing on the porch where she had spent so many evenings over the years. Ryan joined her, slipping his hand into hers with the ease of long habit. "Do you remember the first time we stood here together?" Rebecca asked. "I remember everything about our time together," Ryan said. "Every conversation, every smile, every moment. My memory might not be what it was, but I will never forget a single day with you. I was so afraid back then. Afraid to hope, afraid to trust, afraid to believe I deserved happiness. And now I know that I deserved it all along. We all do. I just needed someone to show me that." Rebecca turned to face Ryan, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "You showed me. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me right back," Ryan said, his voice rough with emotion. "I was so alone before you came. I had this ranch, these horses, this land, but I did not have a home. You made this a home. You made my life worth living." They kissed in the starlight, surrounded by the life they had built together. It was not the desperate, passionate kiss of new love, but something deeper and more enduring. It was the kiss of two people who had weathered storms together, who had built something that would outlast them both, who had chosen each other every single day for more than a quarter century. As they stood together watching the last guests depart down the long drive, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the terrified woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in 1876, looking for nothing more than a place to hide. That woman could never have imagined the life Rebecca had now, the love she had found, the family she had created. "What are you thinking?" Ryan asked. "I am thinking about how grateful I am. For this ranch, for our children and grandchildren, for this life we have built. But most of all for you. For your kindness when I needed it most. For your patience when I was afraid. For your love, which has never wavered, not once in all these years. Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done," Ryan said simply. "From the moment you showed up at my door, desperate and afraid, I knew you were special. I just had to wait for you to see it too." "I see it now," Rebecca said. "Finally, after all these years, I see myself the way you see me, and I am proud of the woman I have become." They went inside together, arm in arm, to their home that was full of memories and love. That night, lying in bed with Ryan beside her, Rebecca sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the strange and winding path that had led her here. Every moment of pain, every day of fear, every mile traveled had been worth it to end up in this place, with this man, living this life. She had arrived in Montana with fear written across her face, believing she would never be safe again. But Ryan's kindness had rewritten her story, transforming it from a tale of survival into a love story for the ages. And as Rebecca drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, She knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as they always do. Rebecca and Ryan lost friends and loved ones, watched their children face their own challenges, and dealt with the aches and pains that came with growing older. But through it all, they had each other, and that made even the darkest days bearable. In 1911, on a warm summer evening, Rebecca and Ryan sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray and their movements slower, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. Thomas was running the ranch with the same dedication his father had shown, while Sarah and William had families and careers of their own. We did well, did we not? Ryan said, his voice a bit rough with age. With the ranch, with the children, with everything. We did better than well, Rebecca said, leaning her head on his shoulder. We did wonderfully, and we did it together. Always together, Ryan agreed. That is the secret. Not giving up on each other, even when things were hard. Choosing love every single day. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon in a blaze of color. The ranch stretched out before them, acres of grassland and possibility that they had tended together for 35 years. In the distance, they could see their grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. You know what I love most about this view? Rebecca asked. What? Everything I see is something we created. This ranch, this family, this life. We built it from nothing but hope and hard work and love, and it will continue long after we are gone, a legacy of what two people can do when they refuse to give up on each other. Ryan kissed the top of her head. You are getting philosophical in your old age. I am getting old enough to appreciate what we have, Rebecca said with a smile, and to understand how rare it is. True love, Ryan, real partnership. Most people never find what we have. Then they are missing the best part of life, Ryan said. Because nothing else comes close to this. Nothing else matters as much. As the stars began to appear, they finally went inside, moving slowly but together as they always had been and always would be. Their story had started with fear and uncertainty, but it had become something beautiful, something enduring, something that would be remembered long after they were gone. In bed that night, Rebecca traced the familiar lines of Ryan's face with gentle fingers. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. For seeing past my fear to the woman I could become. For waiting while I healed. For loving me so completely that I finally learned to love myself. Thank you for trusting me, Ryan said, capturing her hand and pressing it to his lips. For taking a chance on a lonely rancher who had no idea what he was missing until you walked into his life. You are my greatest adventure, Rebecca Ashford, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. They fell asleep holding hands as they had done for thousands of nights before, secure in the knowledge that they would wake up together in the morning. And they did, for many more mornings to come, each one a gift they never took for granted. The story of Rebecca and Ryan Ashford became a local legend in Lewiston, passed down through generations as an example of what love could be, when it was built on kindness, respect, and unwavering commitment. People would point to their ranch and remember the frightened woman who had arrived on the stagecoach, and the cowboy who had seen past her fear to the remarkable person beneath. Rebecca lived to see Montana grow and change, watched as the wild frontier of her youth became more settled and civilized. But she never forgot those early days, the terror and the hope, the fear and the love. She carried those memories with her always, a reminder of how far she had come and how much she had overcome. When Rebecca finally passed away in 1918 at the age of 65, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Ryan held her hand and whispered the words he had spoken to her thousands of times over their 41 years together. I love you. Today, tomorrow, forever. And I love you, Rebecca whispered back, her eyes still bright despite her failing body. Thank you for rewriting my story. Thank you for showing me what love could be. Thank you for everything. Ryan followed her 6 months later, his heart simply unable to go on without the woman who had been his partner, his love, his everything for more than 4 decades. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names, their dates, and a single inscription that Thomas had chosen. Together they built a life from love and hope. Together they rest in peace. The ranch continued under Thomas's leadership and eventually passed to his children and grandchildren. The house that Rebecca had transformed from a dusty bachelor dwelling into a warm and welcoming home remained standing, sheltering new generations of Ashfords. The stories of Rebecca and Ryan were told and retold, their love serving as an inspiration to everyone who heard it. And in the quiet evenings, when the Montana wind whispered through the grass and the stars came out in their thousands, people said you could still feel the love that had built the Ashford Ranch. You could sense the echo of two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over fear, who had built something that death itself could not diminish. Rebecca had arrived in Lewiston with fear written across her face, running from a past that threatened to destroy her. But through Ryan's kindness, through his patience and his unwavering love, her story had been rewritten. It became a tale not of victimhood but of strength, not of fear but of courage, not of survival but of thriving. She had learned that love did not have to hurt, that marriage could be a source of joy rather than pain, that trust could be rebuilt even when it had been shattered. She had discovered her own strength and worth, had built a life beyond her wildest dreams, and had loved and been loved with a depth and purity that most people only read about in stories. And in the end, that was the greatest gift Ryan had given her, not just his love but the space and support to become who she was always meant to be. He had not saved her as much as he had stood beside her while she saved herself. He had not changed her, but had helped her remember who she was beneath the fear and pain. Their love story was not about a hero rescuing a damsel in distress. It was about two broken people who found each other and slowly, carefully, gently helped each other heal. It was about choosing trust over fear, hope over despair, love over everything else. It was about building a life together, one day at a time, one moment at a time, until those moments became years and those years became a lifetime. And it all started with a frightened woman stepping off a stagecoach and a kind cowboy who saw past her fear to the incredible person she could become. Their story, written in the dust of Montana and sealed with love that lasted beyond death itself, would be remembered for generations as proof that kindness can change everything, that love can heal the deepest wounds, and that every person deserves a second chance at happiness. The Ashford Ranch stands to this day, a testament to the power of love and the enduring legacy of two people who refused to let fear win. And when the wind blows across the Montana prairie, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers, locals still say you can hear the echo of laughter from the porch where Rebecca and Ryan spent so many evenings together, building a life that would outlast them both and inspire countless others to believe in the transformative power of love.